Good afternoon, and welcome to a special podcasting event. Today we are presenting a very special program. It is called Take It or Leave It, a conversation with Dr. Barbara Tabor. And it'll be a very straightforward conversation at that, because if you know Dr. Tabor, you know she doesn't pull any punches, she does not shy away from any of her opinions, and she is just about the straightest shooter ever put on this earth, certainly in the state of Virginia. Now, the subject and namesake of this program, Dr. Tabor, is one of the foremost educators, not only of Virginia, but arguably America overall, and you certainly wouldn't hear me argue that point. This woman's credentials are ample, her track record enviable, and the lasting impression she's made on her students is something she encounters on a regular basis. Sure, your average teacher might get approached while walking out of church or standing in line at the grocery store, and that's not to say that these things don't happen, and it's certainly not to disparage such encounters either, by the way. Rest assured, all educators are champions of at least someone, almost by definition. But this is different. Dr. Barbara Tabor is a cut above most. She has consistently, significantly impacted students' lives throughout her career and continues to do so. Her colleagues and peers still depend on her to clean up the many messes which can come about in the education system. Dr. Tabor is a fixer. And not in the Michael Cohen sense. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. But she is a genuine problem solver, and the person people turn to when they need help. After all, how many educators do you know, actually scratch that, how many people in any field of discipline do you know who have been begged to come out of retirement? And furthermore, how many of those would have actually done it? But Dr. Tabor cares. She may be very direct and opinionated, but she is also very caring and compassionate. I could ramble all day about her. I've known her for many years, which is also why it's a particular honor to not only be producing this program, but also to be hosting it. So before I eat up any more of our time, let me introduce the woman of the hour, Dr. Barbara Tabor of Portsmouth, Virginia. So glad you could be here today, Dr. Tabor.
Oh, thank you, Scott. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, well, it's certainly our pleasure. And we've got a lot to talk about, but first, what I want to do is give listeners a little bit of a backstory, just in case we have some newcomers listening to the show today, people who might not already know you, and I'm sure we do. So here goes, and try to keep up, people, because it's going to be a lot of info in a little time. Dr. Tabor has been twice nominated for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. Among other numerous awards and honors, Dr. Tabor is the recipient of a SAIC, Science Teaching Tools Award. She's been a TASC, Teacher of the Year, and Sigma Xi, Science Teacher of the Year. Now, Dr. Tabor received a Master of Arts in Education at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, and a doctorate in Educational Leadership from Jones International University. Dr. Tabor developed and wrote the curriculum for NAS 215, Man and His Environment, Oceanography, Ecology, From the River to the Bay, and she's presented at local, state, and national conferences. Her dissertation was titled Teacher Attitudes Toward Use of Problem-Based Learning in Science Courses with State-Mandated End-of-Course Testing. Dr. Tabor has been a member of many, many teaching associations and honor societies, as well as being a former member of the Kempsville Volunteer Rescue Squad and a life member of Bennett's Creek Volunteer Rescue Squad and the Nansemond Suffolk Volunteer Rescue Squad. She served as a volunteer nationally registered paramedic and EMT instructor for 30 years and a firefighter level 2 for 15 years. Currently, Dr. Tabor serves as a lead evaluator and or team member for Advanced Ed Virginia. And recently, she added Advanced Ed STEM STEAM lead evaluator and or team member to her resume, which of course is still growing. In her free time, Dr. Tabor enjoys scuba diving, fishing, reading, art, and jogging 5K in the local YMCA pool. And now I can take a breath. It's an enviable biography, to say the least. Very dense bio. And by the way, those papers, the dissertation, all these items can actually be found on Dr. Tabor's website, which I'll give you in just a moment. But I did want to point out first that she's been super active in her retirement, which just won't seem to take. Every time she thinks she's out, they drag her back in. But seriously, she has begun substitute teaching, and she has debuted the amazing new website where you're probably listening to this right now, as the show is featured exclusively here, and that is www.drbarbarataborspeaks.com. And I'll spell it out. It's DR and then BARBARA TABERSPEAKS.com. That's www.drbarbarataborspeaks.com. It's an amazing site if you've never been here before, so I suggest you take a look around after the show. You'll certainly like what you see. So let's get into the good stuff. Let's begin at the beginning. Dr. Tabor, take me back in time. Tell me about when and why you decided to pursue a career in education.
Well, I'll tell you. When I started out, I was a Girl Scout, and I went all the way through all the camping, becoming a counselor, camp counselor. Went all the way up through the highest level of Girl Scouts at the time, which was Curve Bar. And I enjoyed working with the campers and being a camp counselor. I talked to my parents about going to college because, Lord knows, we did not have good guidance counseling when I was in high school.
Right.
Only very special students got counseling towards college, and I was not one of those.
Okay.
So I decided I wanted to teach art. And my father, who was a guidance counselor later in life, said, you better get something besides just art education because those jobs are few and far between. So I also added in general science so that I could have a fallback in case the art education didn't work out because I couldn't find a job.
Right.
Essentially, why I became a teacher, I just love helping other people. And it's so much fun to see a light bulb come on. It's a landmark event.
Yes. Well, that's fantastic. And, the classroom, for many, it can be an intimidating place, to say the least. That's what we're told. While one youthful face might not be scary at all on its own, 25 of them staring directly at you, expecting guidance, can surely be daunting, particularly in one's early days as an educator. Do you remember going through such experiences in the early years of teaching?
I would have loved to have just had 25 students. On average, when I started teaching, it was 30, and one year I had 40 students in an oceanography class.
Oh my goodness, 40, wow.
40 was entertaining. But I have, every year I would walk into the classroom just absolutely terrified. You have that dream the night before you go to your first day of school, and every disaster you can think of is occurring.
I remember.
But once you get in there and get rolling, it's not all that intimidating.
Right.
But it's being comfortable in your knowledge and in your skills that makes that a true statement.
Right. Well, I can certainly remember the nightmares from the other side as a student. But it's interesting to hear that it goes both ways. I think a lot of students don't necessarily realize that. But, education is you could say, the most noble profession in the world, but it can also be a thankless one as well. Do you feel that teachers are taken for granted, be it by students, parents, administration?
Well, when you look at what goes on in a classroom, students are going to treat the teacher the same way they treat their parents. Mm-hmm. And whatever they get away with at home, they think they can get away with at school.
Right.
The administration expects certain things from teachers, mostly things that are totally unreasonable. Mm-hmm. And the parents think Johnny's got to get an A because Johnny is the best thing since sliced bread. And yet we're part of the generation of everybody who shows up and is breathing and has a pulse deserves a trophy, and education doesn't work that way.
Yes.
It's just, that teachers are not just taken for granted. They're literally sometimes punching bags for parents and students and administrators who put unreasonable demands on them without just compensation. But I don't want to get ahead of myself here.
Sure. Well, it's interesting that you point out the whole everybody gets a trophy culture, which is a relatively new phenomenon of the last generation, I would say. I guess one could argue that point, but certainly it's not anything that stretches back generations. And I think that when that mindset is introduced into anything really, but certainly education, it really leads to a lot of problems that were not necessarily there before. People are very excitable. A lot of people get upset very easily, parents and students alike. You read about it in the news all the time. These are different times, to say the least. But, I've always been of the mindset that educators ought to be some of the highest paid professionals in the world, based on the weight of responsibility, just that sheer weight of responsibility, and other factors as well. But I imagine that you have some pretty strong opinions regarding teachers' wages as well, having been through, having been in the trenches, so to speak. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when you look at it, 20% of new teachers quit within the first 3 years, and 50% of new teachers quit within the first 5 years. That's according to the Department of Education, it's the National Education Association, and several other research studies that I have looked at.
Yes.
And the reasons they give are low pay, the amount of work that's expected for that low pay, and the fact that they make somewhere around 20% less than somebody comparable professional with the same kind of education. The hardest group to even find are math, science, and special ed teachers.
Right.
Because math teachers and science teachers can make so much more money in industry than they can in the public schools, and private schools pay even less.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
There are benefits to private schools, but they pay even less. So if you're not in teaching because you love working with the kids and you just love seeing the light bulb come on, then that low pay really does hurt.
Right.
Part of it is because teaching has traditionally been a female profession.
Right.
And after World War II and coming up into the current time, more and more men have been coming into the profession and more persons of color. However, they don't stay if they can't support their family.
Yes.
And as I have told you before, when I left Texas, I was in Texas for 4 years with my husband.
Right.
I was a master teacher.
Yes.
When I came back to Virginia, I took a $35,000 pay cut.
That's right. You have told me that. That's
to teach
unbelievable.
in Virginia.
Yeah.
It was quite a shock, and I actually had one school system that only wanted to pay me for 7 years of experience instead of 14.
Okay.
So, because, they could get away with paying less
Yes.
and getting all of the expertise without having to actually compensate me for that.
Right.
So, it is a problem nationwide. And it's worse in the South than it is in a whole lot of the rest of the United States. I would say probably in the Plain States and in the South.
Okay. It's very interesting, and that's a point that what you mentioned a moment ago that had never occurred to me before, that it is actually a holdover from the old days, the wage structure, and that it just so it really just hasn't been modernized. So they're kind of just stuck in the old days in terms of wages.
Pretty much. That's my opinion.
That's your opinion, but it's logical though.
But it's logical, and when you look at it, it is about right. Women are paid approximately 20% less than their male counterparts.
Yes.
So,
wow. That's very interesting.
The whole idea that teachers are paid about 20% less. Of course, everyone just thinks that this is due to the fact that you only work 180 days.
Right.
I have yet to meet or be the teacher that only worked 180 days.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say that. I don't think I've ever known a teacher that only worked 180 days.
And I don't know very many who only work from when they walk in the building to when they leave the building.
Yes.
Which is 8 hours.
Right.
So you never get to leave your work at the building. It always comes home with you.
Of course. Well, Virginia has been somewhat famous or infamous, depending on your stance, for being a non-teachers union state. Is this non-union status still true of Virginia's education system, or has this changed in recent years? And what's your take on it?
Well, Virginia is a right-to-work state, like most of the states in the South. And so you can have a union, but you can't make anybody join it.
Sure.
And you can't have collective bargaining, which is another reason why pay stays low, because there's no collective bargaining.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go out on strike because they'll just replace you. They can fire you and replace you if they can find a teacher, that is. So it's a good situation and a bad situation.
Right.
It's good in that you can't strike, therefore you can't rob the students of their education.
Yes.
Because you didn't get your way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a bad situation in that they can use it to keep your pay stagnant or low. Now, there's only one teachers union in the United States that I know of, and that is the American Federation of Teachers, which is a subsidiary of the AFL-CIO. The National Education Association is not a union. They do not have collective bargaining powers in any state, but they do provide counseling and tort insurance and lawyers for teachers and so forth.
Right.
If you happen to run into problems. But as far as bargaining for your pay, that does not happen through the National Education Association.
Right, okay.
There's not, primarily is to bring everything to the forefront of people's brains and say, look, this is what's going on, and these are things that we need to address. And they do go and lobby, so they are basically a lobbying group.
Uh-huh.
Whereas the American Federation of Teachers is a union per se.